Let's jump into this first story from Newsweek. Joe Biden's New World Order comment jumped on by conspiracy theorists. Okay, let's just read a bit about what Joe Biden said. He said, as one of the top military people said to me in a secure meeting the other day. Okay, can I just pause for a second?
Oh, gosh, that is not what he said.
No,
it's right there. The top military people in the secure meeting about the New World Order.
But I also
He's just talking to Hunter.
I want to point out the two crazy things. They're
they said it was secure.
Yeah. It's a conspiracy theory, and Biden literally prefaced this by saying top military people in our secure meeting said it. But also, why is Biden spilling secure meeting details to the public, like in a rambling? I just imagine that as he's talking, there's like, Kamala is just like, and then you've got like Jen Psaki, and they're going, no, stop. No. Anyway, he said,
it's like, we've discussed the new ways to assassinate Vladimir Putin. Personalized bioweapon, you see. We've got
Hillary was there
on the shelf.
Hillary was there, and she said, can't we just drone this guy?
Oh my gosh.
All right, hold on. Here's the quote. Here's what Biden said. As one of the top military people said to me in a secure meeting the other day, 60 million people died between 1900 and 1946. And since then, we've established a liberal world order. And that hadn't happened in a long while. A lot of people dying, but nowhere near the chaos. And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there, and we've got to lead it, and we've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it. They then go on to say several people online took Biden using the phrase New World Order to confirm the existence of the aforementioned conspiracy theory. Here's what they do. Here's what the media is doing. Powerful world leaders like Clinton, George H.W. Bush, even Hillary Clinton, they've all said there will be a new world order. Now, for most people, they think that means there's going to be a global system, a judicial system or legal system, because the Council on Foreign Relations publicly states that's what their intention is with the liberal world order. They said after World War II, to prevent war, various, powerful institutions came together and created, international organizations and treaties to prevent this from ever happening again. And now there's going to be a new version of that. That's it. That's all it means. So the media will push the most insane and absurd version of the conspiracy so they can try and discredit what Joe Biden just outright said, that in a secure meeting, he was told this.
But I think there's also, and it's, to go back to the headline of the show tonight, there's something even deeper that Biden is getting at, because it's not just that he's talking about setting up a new version of the world order. He's essentially describing the fourth turning. So that means the president of the United States just came out and said that he was briefed by the top levels of our military that we are in a fourth turning. Is that not what he just said?
That's exactly. Yep. Look, he didn't say literally the fourth turning, but you're right.
That's essentially what he's getting at, right?
So the only conclusion.
So clearly they're reading some Strauss-Howe, and
he said four generations.
No. That's too much. It's obvious they're watching Timcast. Right?
Oh yeah.
I think they actually, some people at the White House are, because when we were watching Biden's campaign speech, it was a State of the Union, but he didn't really give a State of the Union. I called it a campaign speech.
Right.
We were like, why are they so tight on Biden? And then they pulled out the camera.
No.
Well,
and they're like, I think they're watching. And then they went back in on his face. I'm like, thanks, guys.
Well, this is an administration that is literally working right now on a global minimum corporate tax, right? And so it's not as though there's something very literal happening when you say new world order. And that's why the conversation about a new world order is immensely frustrating, because there's a literal meaning to the term new world order that has been explicit among global leaders for forever. And every once in a while, they slip up and say a buzzword that's associated with conspiracy theories. But that's what's frustrating about the dismissal of this as a conspiracy theory, is that, like, listen, we have an IMF. We have a World Bank. We have a United Nations. We're working on a global minimum tax right now. This stuff is pretty much out in the open. And when you have a slip from the President of the United States like this, even from an administration that would avoid sort of veering into that territory, it's extremely telling. And it's not even as though, to the point about a fourth turning, that's not even in the Biden consciousness. He's just talking about what his job is, which is to be friends with Boris Johnson and Angela Merkel and all of these people, and to have control at their fingertips.
Well, I think it's both. I do think it's both, though, because he talks about the 60 million dying and that it's this cycle that happens every 3 to 4 generations. So the preface of it is where he's talking about the fourth turning, and that this leads to setting up a new version of that.
Someone
but they always
who-
have to say rules-based order, so they can't say New World Order.
Who wants to read what website that is? What organization that website is?
I'll do
The
it.
World Economic Forum.
It's the World Economic Forum.
Oh, wow.
Can you pull up the article?
Yeah, here we go.
So it's from the World Economic Forum. Who wants
Oh
to read?
my.
Who wants to read the title?
136 countries have agreed to a global minimum tax rate. Here's what it means.
That's a great
Okay.
voice, Jack. I like that.
So the World Economic Forum is citing Reuters, but clearly, the reason I pull this up is the World Economic Forum is very much interested in a lot of this global policy, new world order stuff. The Council on Foreign, you know what? Let me do this. Let's read a little bit here. They said the countries behind the global minimum tax rate together account for over 90% of the global economy. So that is to say, 90% of the global economy are agreeing to a global corporate minimum tax rate.
Which means they're agreeing to the infrastructure to support and enforce a global minimum tax rate. So it's
Yep.
not just that you can make this argument that, like, listen, if we were all on an even playing field, things would make more sense economically. No, they're creating an infrastructure to enforce a global minimum tax rate.
Right. Now check this out. This is the Council on Foreign Relations website. NewsGuard certified, 100 out of 100. Is it a conspiracy theory when the Council on Foreign Relations says, what is the liberal world order? And they literally say, world leaders created a series of international organizations and agreements to promote global cooperation on issues including security, trade, health, and monetary policy. The U.S. has championed this system known as the liberal world order for the past 75 years. During this time, the world has enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity. I just got to pause real quick.
Especially the troops in Vietnam,
Peace
man.
and
They've had a
prosperity
great,
for
really
75
peaceful time in the
years.
jungle. Yeah.
Korea.
Yeah, that was also very peaceful.
The bombing of
I
Belgrade.
think kicking the doors in Iraq was very peaceful for those soldiers.
Rwanda. Peaceful Rwanda.
You know what it is? It's very Jen Psakian. It's like they're bragging about the thing they've done, but it's been an unmitigated failure across the board.
But also it doesn't exist.
Right.
Right? It's
Right,
like they're
right,
bragging
right.
about it, but no.
Maybe
We've created
This
world
is-
peace
So,
and
so
world order.
Michael Anton actually has a great formulation for what this is, and he calls it the celebration parallax. And so the celebration parallax means when they talk about it, it is good and laudatory. But if anyone mentions it in a critical sense, not only are they wrong, but also the thing they're discussing doesn't exist.
Right.
The New World Order is amazing and just so great, and I'm really excited for Klaus Schwab and all that stuff.
It feels like
now
New
it's
World
I can't
chaos,
wait to not
man.
own anything because I'm going to be so happy.
But this is what's interesting is that we lose, and I wrote about this recently, that we have this nuclear order, and nuclear technology is literally younger than some people walking this earth, and it is the most dramatic technological advancement that has ever happened in the history of humanity, and it's happened over the course of people's lifetimes. Like, it has happened that quickly, and we take for granted how dramatically it changed the way that we operate, and so the New World Order is actually really new. It's really new, and it's something that, like, when you have all this technology at your fingertips, of course the leaders of the United States, of course the leaders of all of these different countries are going to want to have the power concentrated at their fingertips because it's so powerful, and because they have this sort of technological ability to do it now that they can concentrate power and rule over everyone because they're terrified of what would happen if they didn't.
What I'm wondering is, are the governments making concessions with these corporations? Like, they're like, the writing's on the wall, the corporations are taking over, let's just intercede with them instead of try and resist. Like, you said that they're all working together to
They're the
create a
same.
global tax rate. Like, is that...
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just like the governments have given up and they're like, hey, corporations are coming, Klaus Schwab's right, corporate governance.
I totally think so. I think they're the same. I mean, Trump's first Secretary of State was Rex Tillerson. Like, he was like literally the CEO of Exxon. And people, it's like mind-boggling to me that people forget that. But I think they're basically the same at this point.
I just like to point out that the Council on Foreign Relations basically describes the New World Order conspiracy theory as something that's already happened. That's the weird thing.
For 75 years.
For 75 years, there has been a liberal world economic order where world leaders created a series of international organizations and agreements to promote global cooperation on issues including security, trade, health, and monetary policy. I said it fast. There you go. Anyway, the point is, now that Biden is like, every 3 to 4 generations, something changes, basically saying we're in the fourth turning, and there's going to be a new world order, no longer the liberal world order, there'll be a new world order. Well, I don't understand why they're acting like it's not a real thing.
But it's also what we are actually seeing, and the question is, will this trigger a Thucydides trap, right? because, and I believe it's The Economist that came out and dubbed what we're starting to see the sort of edges of right now is an alternative world order. And this is the idea that because the U.S. is sanctioning Russia so hard, because the U.S. is now sanctioning CCP officials, they've threatened sanctions on India. Well, guess what? You put those three countries together, that's over half the world's population. So they are going to find a way to work together outside of you, and they're going to build their own order in order to do so. So the Saudis, of course, are already selling oil in the yuan, so they're getting away from the petrodollar. You might see a rise of
Wait, they're already doing it?
Yeah, they're discussing it.
Right.
You're also seeing India and Russia are already starting to trade in between their own currencies. They're not using U.S. dollars. So that's the point of all of this, is because all of these transactions are done, at least certainly for oil and energy writ large, are done in U.S.-backed currency. So that's the SWIFT system. So the idea that the US dollar is just fiat is actually, I'm sorry, crypto bros, it's not 100% correct, because the US dollar is essentially backed by something, and that's oil. Because of this artificial demand for US dollars, because of foreign countries always needing to convert into the US dollar, that props it up. So it's not necessarily gold backed, it's sort of oil backed by this global liberal
But look, I mean, nothing's stopping any one of these countries or world leaders from switching off of the U.S. dollar. I mean,
Saddam Hussein did it.
Yeah, Saddam Hussein.
That worked out.
Gaddafi wanted to do it.
Gaddafi, that worked out for him too.
It worked out really well for them, didn't it?
Yeah,
a lot of guys can just tell the U.S. government, like, F you, I'm doing my country my own way, and they don't really care.
Well, and so they're all anti-nationalist, right? Like, nationalism is terrible. It is intentionally conflated with white nationalism, unless it's Ukrainians fighting Putin. And then everyone that's sort of in the neoliberal establishment loves nationalism and celebrates it. And we see stories in the media on CNN of these Ukraine patriots who are, just carrying the banner of nationalism, which these same people think is so icky here, because it's about, they see themselves as citizens of the world. And that's especially true of the people, like, that doesn't mean you can't be American, but you see yourself as a global citizen, right? They have something literally called the Global Citizen Festival before your nationality, but you watch how quickly that flips when the nationalists are in support of their agenda, basically.
Right, so CNN will, argue that somebody should be fired from their job because they're cracking their knuckles and it accidentally looks like an OK symbol. But an actual commander of the Azov battalion was just on CNN yesterday, who are an avowed far-right, neo-Nazi, replete unit within the U.S. or within the Ukrainian military.
Who was it who was straightening their jacket before an interview?
Stephen Miller.
Yeah.
And they said it was a double white power.
These people are insane. I can't imagine. I don't understand how anybody.
So the
really
same
believes
people,
it.
right? And what, to Emily's point, the same people who will see Nazis everywhere and behind every shadow here in the United States, when they're faced with an actual group of avowed neo-Nazis,
the boy who cried
they will
wolf.
say, oh, no. Those people, they're fine because they're fighting for something that we need to fight against.
I was researching the Azov, and I look back. It looks like the Germans, after World War I, took Ukraine as like a protectorate, and then a bunch of Germans were there. And then when World War II broke out, a bunch of Nazis were there in Western Ukraine and got really vicious and started up Azov. I don't know much about it, but this is where I got to from there. This is why there's Germans, why there were Nazis in Western Ukraine, is because it was a holdover from the wars.
It's not so much that it was.
that?
It's not so much that it was a whole. I mean, I think you have half of it right. It's this idea, and it wasn't Azov Battalion back then. It was this guy Stepan Bandera, who
the Banderites.
so Banderites and Banderism arose because of this. Now it started off as being an anti-Soviet movement and a pro-Ukrainian nationalism movement, kind of like you were talking about, but then it went completely extreme very quickly. And even before the Germans arrived in World War II, they were essentially declaring themselves on the side of the Germans because they were so anti-Soviet Union. So they start slaughtering Russians, they start slaughtering Poles, Jews. If you were in that area of Western Ukraine, it's known as West Galicia, or East Galicia, that you were basically not Ukrainian. You were just completely wiped out by this guy Bandera. But the previous president of Ukraine just recently actually named him as a hero of Ukraine and a hero of the nation. There's statues to this guy that are up in their city squares.
They must be torn to the ground.
There was a photo of one of the Azov guys with the black sun. I think it was. Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was wearing like a pin or
You
emblem.
see them
Yeah.
everywhere. I think there was a Reuters article where they had someone who had the patch on, and they had to they actually blurred it out.
Wow.
Oh, that's the SS symbol
On the shot.
Yeah.
Himmler did that.
It's not a
The
good
black
symbol.
sun. This is the first, I hadn't read about it yet. I know the symbol though.
You know, we got a weird whatever is going on in this country where there are shows like this where we're able to point out that Ukraine has staunch nationalists and, you know, overt neo-Nazi ideology, yet the mainstream media is cheering for it. The Antifa left is now pro-fa, I guess.
So weird.
Pro-fascist.
I mean,
They're
it's
just
so incredibly offensive because they have no idea what they've done to they actually don't understand the fear that they've instilled in normal working class people who, for instance, really like Donald Trump and are afraid that they're going to be called a Nazi, a literal Nazi, by people at their office place, by the Human Resources Department for tweeting something in support of Trump or Facebooking something in support of Trump. And so it is just like to see this. It is so incredibly offensive because they spent years seeing Nazis everywhere.
I have a question though. What would happen if someone made black sun buttons like pins, but it was yellow and blue like the Ukrainian flag, and it said Azov, you know, on the top?
You can see
Do you
that
think-
Kleenex box is yellow and blue.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh, yeah,
But do you
supports
think
them.
these leftists would wear that
Yes.
if you told them like
Yeah,
this is a
100%.
pro-Ukrainian symbol of the
100%.
Azov?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They'd walk around wearing actual Nazi symbols.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't care.
That'd be a
Absolutely.
good that'd be a good like Ryan Long segment to do or
Yeah.
something.
It comes down to emotion in that situation. Like, are they familiar with the symbol and does it strike an emotional chord? If it does, they'll stay away from it. But if
What-
they don't
I mean-
know, they'll gladly
Well, hold on.
accept it.
I'll ask you a couple of different scenarios. Let's say you go to Union Square in New York City, and you have these pins, and you walk up to someone and say, "Hey, would you wear this in support of the freedom fighters in Ukraine, the Azov Battalion? It's the Ukrainian flag." They'll probably say yes, right? Now, what if you said, "Would you wear this in support of the Azov Battalion? It's the Ukrainian flag and the Nazis' black sun. This is their symbol." Do you think they would wear it then?
Yeah.
You still think they
if
would?
You, if you
told
said it
them?
was the Nazi black
Yeah.
sun,
You think they would
I
still?
think
They would still do
would.
it.
I don't.
I think they would get a short circuit. But
Yeah, it doesn't process.
Right.
what's even more interesting to me though is that you go up to people who have never heard of Ukraine, have never heard of Belarus, maybe other than in some like abstract discussion, probably can't find it on a map, and yet are now suddenly these experts on it, and also it becomes their entire identity just overnight. The same people who were, vaccine experts a couple of weeks before, and prior to that they were epidemiologists, and before that they were racism experts throughout all of 2020. And
Historians.
yeah, and now they're military members who are saying, these ridiculous comments like, "Oh, you should just run up and throw paint at the tank, and that'll stop them," and that you're throw some water balloons at it with filled with paint.
My personal favorite
craziness
was when Zelensky held up the red salute, and I said I didn't know if he was supporting Black Lives Matter or communism, because it was meant to be like tongue in cheek. And then I got a bunch of responses where they're like, "You wouldn't have, you're a coward. You don't have the balls to go to Ukraine." And I was just like, because I've been there 3 times. Like,
Well, you were there
covering-
in the original coup.
I was there. I was there in the start of the Euromaidan protest for several months, and then I went back, a couple years later, and sort of followed up and did a little video and stuff. So yeah, I was actually there, and I had guys surrounding me, screaming at me, and I was like, American journalist, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're cool now. Come on in, dude." It was crazy. We got to go inside a government building they had ransacked. They'd like stripped all the paperwork and pulled it all out. It was nuts. Crazy times, man. I wasn't there when they started throwing the firebombs though.
What city were you in?
I was in Kiev. I was in
Kiev.
Euromaidan. Yeah, this is the
yeah.
Independent Square they call it or whatever. Euromaidan. It's Maidan Square.
Maidan Square, yeah.
But they were calling it Euromaidan because they all wanted to be in the EU. Oh. And the crazy thing is, we went to a pro-Yanukovych rally where everyone's waving these flags, and it was being reported in British press as like.
So Yanukovych, just for people who don't know, Yanukovych was the current president at this time who essentially blew up this economic package for the EU that a lot of people wanted him to sign. They wanted him to sign this. Please do this.
Who hired Tony Podesta and
hired
Paul
Tony
Manafort
Podesta and
to
Paul
massage
Manafort,
their
yes.
messaging in the Senate with Hillary Clinton's State Department.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
Wait,
so that's-
Yanukovych did?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and they set it up through something called the Center for a Modern, the European Center for a Modern Ukraine, to try and get around FARA laws,
Right.
because it looked like they were just working for this neutral think tank. Is the most like beautifully corrupt. It's just a
Right, and all the
perfect-
payments were like going through Cyprus, and yeah.
Wow.
So so the Ukrainians get all mad and very upset about this, at least in places like Kiev. So they launched this massive protest, turns very violent. But you also had Ukrainians who were still supporting Yanukovych, and he had been, at the time, the democratically elected president of the country. So you did have these dueling protests in the background.
Just to clear that up, Yanukovych was working with Tony Podesta. He hired Tony Podesta?
Yeah, so he had a lobbying operation in the United States that included Paul Manafort, who was working for Mercury at the time, and Tony Podesta's Podesta Group, which is now defunct, which is amazing because it was one of the biggest lobbying firms in D.C., one of the most powerful lobbying firms
Easily,
in D.C.
yeah.
And it went corrupt. I mean, it went defunct over this corruption because it came out he was a casualty of the war against Trump, the media's war against Trump, because they obviously caught Paul Manafort on this, and he was convicted of violating FARA law. But it was amazing. And you can look at the lobbying records of Tony Podesta's firm meeting with people in Hillary Clinton's State Department as a representative for the European Center for a Modern Ukraine, which he later admitted he knew was basically was a front for Yanukovych.
So Yanukovych wanted to join the Americans, or was he a Russian? I thought he was a Russian puppet.
Well, that's what, and Jack could probably explain this better, but that goes, that has happened in different ways depending on the time. So if it's before the EU, the collapse of the EU deal, it's different than if it was after.
What I was told when I was down there.
But since we're talking about that, you have to point out Mueller goes after Manafort, who had been Trump's campaign manager. Trump has to fire Manafort after all of this comes out in like March of 16 or so. Or maybe it may have been later than that. They have this thing called the Black Ledger, which turns out to be fake, but made by Ukrainian operatives, but ended up, they said it was these like illegal payments to Manafort. But throughout all of this, Manafort had been doing it through the Podesta Group.
Yep.
Podesta and Tony Podesta were given immunity during all of this, but Manafort has to go down for it.
Interesting.
Same
I
deal.
was told by some of the activists that their view, at least, a lot of the students and a lot of protesters, was that Yanukovych was playing both sides. That he would,
clearly.
Right. So he was trying to get these deals, these sweet, deals from the West, and then he would go to Russia and be like, "Oh, look what they're going to do for us." And so people were like, the protesters wanted to be part of the EU. Being a part of the EU, this is their perspective. We could move to Poland, we could move to the UK, get jobs, the economy is going to immediately improve, our lives will immediately improve. And that's one of the reasons the EU was like, hold on there, we'll figure it out. But the concern was Ukraine's economy was too weak. A lot of them were scared. They said,
and also the levels of corruption.
Yeah.
Right.
You need
absolutely.
to meet certain wickets and
Yes.
certain bars before you can gain entry to the EU.
And truth be told, that's what Biden said. Biden was saying, corruption was a big deal. We were trying to weed out the corruption. It's just funny because I don't trust him because he is corrupt.
Like, I got to know for myself. I'm
making
putting
it
my
worse.
son on the board of Burisma.
And
Right?
this is an amazing, again.
Once we get our money out of Burisma, then
And when you start
Then the corruption will be over.
when you start peeling back the layers of the Russia collusion hoax, and you find at the bottom here that Tony Podesta is the brother of John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, and was taking money from Yanukovych, who playing both sides, I think is a fair way to say it, and fled to Russia, by the way, after the collapse of that deal,
Right.
and was protected by Putin's government. When you peel back to that layer, you realize what bullshit this is.
Yanukovych hired Tony Podesta, who was running Podesta Group at the time.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
And so he hired Podesta and he hired Manafort because that's how lobbying works in D.C. They need to have a Republican and a Democrat basically to get what they want done so that they can massage both the Republicans and the Democrats. And that's why I always use this example of it so perfectly crystallizes corruption in D.C.
If Yanukovych was working with the Americans in the Podesta Group to become with this American style thing, then why would Podesta flee to Russia?
No, Yanukovych
Yanukovych.
fled to...
Oh, okay. I thought you said Tony Podesta did.
No,
Yanukovych got it.
No, I don't know where Tony Podesta is.
I think he's in New York City. I could be wrong about that. I think didn't he live with Abramovich? That woman, weren't they like friends?
yeah, I don't know.
She did that.
Oh,
like,
really?
Cooking that like blood cooking. There's weird people.
She
Yeah,
did. She did
weird
that
stuff.
famous "The Artist Is Present." Do you ever see that?
I actually saw it in person.
Oh, really?
Why?
I was because I was visiting.
Real quick though, for those that don't know, she just sat in a room for like 30 days. Is that what it was?
No, it's like the lobby of MoMA,
Oh.
of the Museum of Modern Art
She
in
sat in
New York,
MoMA.
and on like the second floor lobby. But I was going at the time because they had the Tim Burton exhibit that was only going to be there for a little bit, and it was so Tim Burton opened up his archives. And everything from Edward Scissorhands to Beetlejuice to like the Batman costume, the Joker's stuff, the Nightmare Before Christmas, all the little Jack Skellington heads and everything. And I was like, oh, that's great, Tim Burton. We were in New York. I said, we got to check this out because it was only there for a limited time. They had like a sandworm from Beetlejuice coming out of the
cool.
ceiling. It was awesome. But as we're going up, we see this woman in all red, this red dress, just sitting in a chair, and there's this sort of roped area around it, and everybody's looking at her, and you know, this is probably like maybe 2010 or so, and you know, I'm looking at it. I was like, well, what's with the lady in the chair? Why are people looking at this? Oh no, it's high art, right?
They're not sending their best.
I'm like, is she going to be drawing something? Does she do caricatures like the people on the street or something?
Let me tell you.
It's just this.
Let me tell you what's disconcerting.
Yeah.
What's disconcerting to me is that people would come in and you could wait in line to sit down in a chair like in front of her.
Right.
And there were people who would like sit down and
Jay-Z would.
They'd start crying. They would just start crying. And I'm just like, why are you crying? You know, it just people. I don't know, man. I really wonder sometimes about a lot of people. I'm just gonna say it again for the 800th time in the past week. Every day we get a news story that's a hoax. There's we got the Supreme Court hearings going on for what's her name?
Ketanji Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone tweeted, "Let me just remind everybody that Christine Blasey Ford credibly accused Brett Kavanaugh, and Republicans didn't care." And I just see that, and I'm just like, dude, you guys, you lie about basically every major political story nonstop, all day, every day, and then a month goes by and it gets debunked. So no, you could come out and point at the sky and say there's a giant meteor. I'm not looking up. Just like the movie,
the movie, yeah.
No, you're not going to give me. It's the easiest motion in the world to look up. I won't do it. Screw you. You guys are liars.
I'll give you an example. Today is the 3-year anniversary. 3 years it's been of the Mueller report coming out and that press conference that he gave, completely debunking the Trump-Russia collusion hoax.
Wow, 3 years.
3 years since the debunking of the hoax is today.
Wow.
And yet you go to anybody on the left or your casual CNN, MSNBC viewer, they all believe it 100%.
Well, they're bringing it back. I mean, it's having actually a revival, which is really interesting. You're seeing a lot more people on the left continuing to talk about it now because it's their deflection point when they talk about the Biden administration's handling of Ukraine. They're like, well, Donald Trump was in bed with Putin. We've been doing this for years, and you still haven't understood. You still haven't reckoned with the disaster that was.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Nothing persuades them otherwise.
They meant to solidify this sort of government takeover that they were pushing in Ukraine, bringing them into the NATO fold, bringing them into the security blanket during the Hillary Clinton administration, right? But of course, the Hillary Clinton administration never took place, and so they needed this placeholder to sort of keep that going, keep that energy going throughout the 4 years of Trump. And then that became the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Then finally, after 2020, which was essentially the same kind of domestic color revolution that we were just talking about, the color revolution of Maidan, you see those exact same tactics being used here in the United States, right down to the violent riots in cities. And then when it ended, suddenly Ukraine and Victoria Nuland, the same exact person who was behind so much of that in 2013, 2014, comes right back in.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.